Hi, Misha here, and as promised, we're going to do an actual black box talking about my thoughts following the election. Yeah, it's been a month. I don't care, because frankly, that tends to be how my mind works. I don't give in to snap decisions. I don't tend to just go with the gut. I am very analytical, you might have noticed. And I've had a lot to think about when I've had time to think about it. Although, to be fair, frankly, life has had a lot more important things for me on a personal level to deal with this past month than kind of abstract election stuff. Sorry, that's just kind of how it goes. So when I've had time to think about it, I do, but life kind of keeps me doing other things. I hope that makes sense. I'm sure it does. But I have thought about it. And I haven't really been super engaged with a lot of the goings on, especially on YouTube, especially of the pundits. So if I miss something, which I'm sure I will, let me know. But also keep in mind with the way quote-unquote news works today, no one can catch everything. Seems like every time you talk to someone, they go, have you heard about this? Have you heard about that? No. Or if the shoe could be on their foot. You hear about something, you let friends know, and they haven't heard because there's just too much. Real news, fake news, bullshit, what have you. And at the end of this video, I'll explain who I voted for, not just in 2024, but also 2020 and 2016. Because as funny as things have been, I think it's time to kind of clear the air and say where I stand, at least as of now, don't you? So with that, I want to dive in and discuss some things. And I want to begin with my attitude about Donald Trump. But don't worry, we're going to get into Biden, we're going to get into Harris, we're going to get into the Republican Party, and we're going to get into the Democrat Party, all in good time, I promise. Alright, beginning with Trump. Sorry, I'm trying to get the mic, it's moving around on me. I'm wearing a jacket, so it's kind of hard to find a place to clip it, because it's cold out here. I'm sure I won't be outside for the full video, but you couldn't tell. I was actually trimming my nails, and I like to do that outside because I hate nail trimmings inside on the floor. Drives me nuts. Trump. If you go back before November 2020, you might notice something. I don't say an awful lot about Trump. And when I do, it usually pertains to gun rights. And it's usually me saying, guys, Trump's not as pro-2A as you think. I stand by that. Not only did the Hearing Safe Act die a very quick, very silent death in 2017, after the Vegas shooting, he came out very much in favor of the red flag laws. Of course, later on, he disavowed that, which is a little ironic because one thing Trump supporters often say is he doesn't flip-flop. Well, he did on that. Or maybe he just changed his mind. I know it's a crazy notion that politicians can change their mind, but they do. And then, of course, under his administration, there were various things on the bump stock and arm braces towards the end. Of course, that did carry over into Biden's, so on and so forth. But outside of that, of saying, look, Republicans aren't in actuality as pro-2A as they like to pretend to be. And this goes back to Reagan and Bush Sr. and all them. I didn't say a whole lot because I didn't have a whole lot to say, frankly. Trump never did really live rent-free in my head. I didn't spend a whole lot of my life thinking about him. Why would I? He's a millionaire, billionaire politician. I frankly never quite understood the media's fascination with him. And they certainly were fascinated with him as he was president. And that would continue after 2020. No, my next thing about mentioning him was the 2020 election fraud thing. When Rudy Giuliani and Trump and others said that there was widespread corruption, widespread fraud in 2020, at the very first I thought, well, they wouldn't go on national television and say this unless they had evidence. And indeed, they promised evidence, which never came. Now, I know you're going to say, what about this? What about that? Trust me, or not, I really don't care. Every single one of those things was either too small to matter or was frankly fraudulent, didn't happen, or there was a more innocent explanation for things that were seen. It never panned out. And more importantly, and this isn't me going with what was on the news, quote-unquote news. This was me actually watching the court cases as they went to court and what Trump's own attorneys claimed. Basically, I felt lied to. That's what really turned me off. I do not like being lied to overtly. And when it really hit its peak, where I really just had enough, was the Georgia phone call. It amazes me the number of people that have never heard the Georgia phone call. I don't mean some 30-second chopped down high reel version. I mean the whole 1 hour plus phone call. I listened to the whole thing because it's recorded from the White House and Georgia State House. It's a real thing. That to me was something an American president should never do. And I had enough. And I said as much. But even then, I pretty much just came on to say that once the Electoral College speaks, that's it, by the Constitution. I was just trying to give a civics lesson. And frankly, I was right, because Biden was president for 4 years. All the stuff about Trump coming back or having an election never came to be. Okay? And then we get to this year. Trump's trial. I do not know what happened in that courtroom. No one does. What I do know is 12 jurors, some of which were admitted Fox News watchers, found him guilty. What we know is that it seems to have been a fair trial. If it wasn't fair, why wasn't it? Now, some would say the establishment was after him. Undoubtedly, because for 4 years, he kept on going about this and that. Here's the thing, though. Donald Trump has been in and out of court virtually his entire adult life. Most of it was civil stuff, granted. But if someone ends up in court that often, accused of this and that and the other, there is probably something to it. A lot of that came before he was even in politics. And as I said, I feel like the Georgia case was probably the most damning one, but of course that got screwed up by the whole Fannie Willis thing down there and the way the prosecutor conducted herself, compromised herself, which is completely ridiculous. I made that video back in May and June because I wanted folks to just take a moment and realize what kind of person Donald Trump is. His values, his norms, what have you. Okay? So those things have kind of led to this narrative online, which at times does kind of amuse me, that I'm a leftist or a Democrat, any of that. Buckle up, Buttercup. Because here's where we're going to go from here. When I did that last video, Biden was still running. Then the Harris thing happened. Much has happened. So here are my thoughts on that situation. And then we're going to get into the GOP and the Democrat Party themselves. Donald Trump does have fans. But many people who worked for him have come out against him. He didn't have the support of Mike Pence. And he's screwed over a lot of people over the years, from business ventures to politics. He is a convicted felon. Whether he pardons himself or tries or not, we don't know. Whether the Supreme Court lets that stand, being a person, one's own juror, we don't know if that'll even work. Who knows where things are going to go. But as it stands, a jury of his peers has convicted him. He was not even qualified to work in most federal jobs. Right now, he's not legally allowed to own or carry a firearm. Felon. Defeating Donald Trump with everything going on, not to mention at his age of 78 now, 77 when the election started going at the beginning of the year, should have been a slam dunk. The motherfucking morons at the Democrat Party couldn't even do that. People, media, online pundits, whatever, have been talking for years about Donald Trump and how bad he is. In fact, even though Joe Biden has been president for 4 years, it feels like Donald Trump never left. The media has covered Donald Trump more than they have Joe Biden. They love him. They absolutely love him. It is just a symbiotic, if not parasitic, relationship like no other in modern politics. I said when Joe Biden won in 2020, if he would be a one-term president and voluntarily lay down power, just say, I'm not seeking a second term because of my age or whatever, he would go down in history as a great president for stepping back. Very rarely in U.S. history has that happened. Technically only once with Polk. Although, technically, Johnson didn't seek re-election, but he had technically 2 terms, so not to split hairs. That's not what happened. The minute Joe Biden decided to run again, things got dicey. And that's before we really knew about his mental deterioration. So he's running, okay? Never mind that his approval rating has been between like 35 and 40% the whole time. Never mind that he's being blamed for all kinds of things, from Gaza to Ukraine and the economy. Right, wrong, I'm not saying, I'm just saying it is. Never mind that he is well over 80. He's running. And at first, it was said by the Democrats and by the media mouthpieces that he was perfectly aware. You know what? I had a grandfather that stayed very mentally sharp well past 85. Bernie Sanders is older than Biden. He seems pretty sharp, as best we can tell. So age is not automatically a disqualifier. And then the debate happened. My God. What was that? That torpedoed it. And then they brought Harrison as their candidate. Possibly someone with a lower approval rating than Joe Biden. And gave her 3.5 months to construct and run a campaign. Now, granted, do I think that was originally the plan? Honestly, no. At least I don't see any evidence of it. However, a lot of skeletons are coming out of a lot of closets, so if in a few weeks it does come out that that was the plan all along, It wouldn't shock me. And I think at first her campaign gained momentum. It seems like July and August were good. Gaining support and up through her debate with Donald Trump. It seems like it's doing quite good. And she comported herself quite well in that debate. Certainly scored some points. And rather artfully, in a very politician way, evaded a lot of questions. There's a lot of times she said a lot of words and said actually nothing of substance. But again, that's something that Bill Clinton was also very good at. Yeah. But then it turned. That seems to have been the peak. And then it slid. October was bad for the Democrats, for Harris, frankly, and they never really regained momentum. I was here at this cabin, almost in this exact spot, the day of the election. Remember I said earlier that I have other life events that are more important, frankly. That was the day we lost power and all that. Yeah, that was more in my mind than an abstract election, frankly. That night, I did tune in here and there, see what was going on, and the beginning was the beginning. I had a lot of friends saying, oh, we won't know for days or weeks. I said, I don't think so. I think we'll know. One way or the other, I thought this was going to be a pretty decisive election. Either the Democrats were successfully messaging and all the predictors and poll people were right, and Harris was going to have a blue wave, or Donald Trump, a known quantity, would prevail, would keep that momentum up. But I thought one way or the other we'd know something. And I'm going to be frank with you. By 9 o'clock that night, it was already getting real clear. Because area after area was going red. She was only performing as well, in some cases under Biden, and nothing was flipping. Nothing was going. There wasn't a wild card. I don't know why, but I always kind of just thought if it was going to go for her, there would be like a wild card flip, like Ohio or one of the Carolinas or Florida. Not really, but you know what I mean. Like there'd be some crazy, kind of like we saw with Biden. You know, got that going, Arizona going for Biden, and that was something that Fox called early on that night. Was pretty monumental. And it was funny, I have to admit, watching the pundits try to go, there's still a path, as it narrowed, and as momentum kept going. And my personal thing was, the one thing, I confess, this is my human moment of kind of meanness, I admit this, but Alan Lichtman, it's funny, the Democrats were really touting him. He'd been in exile after 2016 when he predicted Trump with his 13 keys, blah, blah, blah. And he stood by his keys, I'll give him credit. But watching him see it all go away that night, him going, that's not good. At least he didn't try to sugarcoat it like some of the other pundits. I'll give him credit there too. But I think the reason I took such glee is he reminded me so much of the professors I knew at university when I was in grad school who thought they had politics all figured out and things could be broken down by the numbers and metrics and systems. And I had a problem with those people back in 2003, 2004, and I still do today. I think they missed the point. So there was a little bit of schadenfreude seeing a surrogate for some of the professors I disagreed with and kind of get it. Remember, too, the Democrats had him on the outs after 2016. But that's the thing. Lichtman, his claim to fame was 2016. That was the time he kind of called it. I could have called it. I did. Trump was going to beat Hillary in 2016. That was pretty easy. And to be fair, He didn't call 2000. Everyone likes to say he has a flawless record. No, he missed 2000. Now, to be fair, Al Gore did win the popular vote, and that was a very narrow margin in Florida for Bush. But he did get that wrong. All the other elections he called were pretty much gimmies, frankly. So I think he had one lucky hit 8 years ago, and he's kind of been riding that ever since, even if it did make the Democrats unhappy with him. And that's so stupid, to be unhappy with someone because they're not saying what you want them to say. I decided to kind of go on that aside. So the day after the election, I had mixed feelings. And I had some friends that were happy, some friends that were quite upset and worried. And where did I fall? Complicated. Again, what really turned me off to Trump was being lied to at the end of 2020 and him trying to strong-arm the election. But guess what? The Democrats also lie, and that's becoming more and more apparent, and manipulate. They're no better. And perhaps even worse. And of course, that all goes back to the 2016 election and the modern parties we find today and their messaging and all that. It's very interesting where we're at now. It really is. So the parties, a very brief history of where we kind of got into it. You can go back and talk Civil War when the Republicans were the anti-slavery party, at least that's the thing, and the Democrats were the traditional establishment party. Actually started off as the Federal Democrats. They were against the Whigs. The Whigs dissolved in the 1850s, and the Republicans came in. And for a very long time, Northerners were seen as Republicans, and if they came down, they were carpetbaggers. If you sided with them, you were a scallywag, all that stuff. So the South was Democrat, and Democrats were the party that bolstered, frankly, racism and Jim Crow laws. And that would really go through World War I. But then we get into the 20s, the Roaring 20s, Prohibition, all that. And then, of course, you have Hoover, who's a Republican, and he was blamed for a lot of the problems, including the very high tariffs in 1931. So that paved the way for FDR to come in, win in 32, and really help reinvent the Democrat Party as a national party of power and a party for labor, a party for the people, a party for more and more equality, and all that. And of course, the FDR presidency is the longest in U.S. history, and hopefully will be the longest in U.S. history, because after it, because of him winning 4 terms, it was decided that 2 needed to be codified in law, because before that it was just a norm to run for 2 and then, or run for a re-election, and that was it. And FDR shattered that. He had his reasons, but it did cause the government to have to actually make that, in addition to, and I think that was a good call. But of course, he led the Truman. So the Democrats had the White House for 20 years. Then we had Eisenhower for 8, and while he was a Republican, he was a war hero, first and foremost. I like Ike. It'd be a good slogan, wouldn't it? But, yeah, he wasn't really anything. At this time, the Republican Party was kind of rudderless. So in 1960, Kennedy came in, and he was a breath of fresh air, kind of, at least in some ways, continuing on for FDR, that New Deal pattern, the new frontier. And of course, his assassination led to Johnson, who who actually did more domestically than he gets credit for. Civil rights and all that was because of Johnson, even though he was a Southerner. Probably because he was. He was a character that was rough around the edges. In fact, him and Trump would probably really like each other. But the Vietnam War torpedoed him. And then, of course, RFK Sr.'s assassination, Robert Kennedy Sr.'s assassination in '68, ended Democrat hopes to keep in the White House. That let Nixon in. Now, Nixon had been a Republican in the party for a long time. He ran against Kennedy. But, of course, his administration came in, vowed to end the Vietnam War, and did so about as well as it could be, and actually had very good foreign policy against China. But this is a Republican Party without a lot really focusing. It just was kind of there, anti-war in some ways, because the war is so unpopular. But then, of course, Watergate happened, which now means every fucking thing gets the word gate attached to it. And yeah, we're not even going to get into Watergate, but anyway, scandal. That led to a populist, a grassroots movement of Jimmy Carter coming in '76 after Ford. So Carter came in with a lot of enthusiasm, but of course that would die quickly. Part of it was the economy, gas prices, part of it was the Iran thing. Then you get Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan reinvented the Republican Party. He set the Republican Party on the course it would maintain for a number of years. And when he went for re-election in '84, it was one of the most landslide re-elections in American history. Virtually every electoral vote. Democrats liked him. And at this point, the Republican Party went from rudderless to the preeminent party, at least for the presidency, and it was the Democrat Party that was really losing its focus. That New Deal, that New Frontier spirit, that was looking a little rusty and old. And it didn't really take into account modern business and international relations and corporations. At this time, the Democrats needed to reinvent themselves. But it wouldn't come soon enough by 1988 when George H. Bush, Reagan's VP of course, would run for presidency and win. Now, George H. Bush has had a lot of critics over the years. But I think some of it's overblown, but you can go here and there. But he wasn't an uncontroversial figure, and he wasn't near as popular as Reagan. But he won in 1988, meaning that the Republicans now would have the White House for 12 years. And it looked like he was on course to win in '92. The Gulf War went well for America. It was the kind of war America likes, short, sweet, and we can say victory. But then the economy went, and, well, us folks here in Arkansas gave the old Slick Willie. I met Bill Clinton when I was young. Charismatic, doesn't even cover it. And not only did Clinton come in and take the White House, a little bit of an upset. At least I remember back, and I was relatively a young teenager, at this time, people saying, it's nice to have a hometown boy, because he was from the middle or even lower classes, certainly working class, to get there. But people really didn't think he would win, at least as of that August or so of that year. But it got more and more likely, and he came in. And again, while he's not controversial, he's not without his controversies, Lord, heaven helps us, he easily won re-election. And this is when the kind of neo-democratic movement, the centrist movement, was coming in the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party is now reinventing itself, getting rid of more and more of the New Deal attitudes, and really adopting a lot more of the Reagan-era Republican attitudes. It's becoming more and more comfortable with large business, corporations, international things. There is a change in the Democrat Party in the Clinton era. And that's the where the Democrat Party kind of solidifies itself. And just as we talked about earlier, in 2000, the Republicans won by the skin of their teeth. I mean, 2020 election has nothing on the 2000 election. 2020 election was a blowout compared to 2000. It came down not just to 100,000 votes or 10,000 votes, but under 1,000 votes in one state. And it probably could have been drug out even further, except Al Gore actually conceded and oversaw his own defeat because he'd been vice president. So he ratified that and went in. So then we get George W. Bush. It was surprising to a lot of folks, even though Al Gore is a funny figure. He wasn't all that. He was seen as very wooden, kind of dorky when he was VP. He's actually gotten a lot more popular after he got out of presidency, or at least out of the government, I should say. Sorry. Kind of reminds me of like Jimmy Carter, frankly. Jimmy Carter is a lot more popular today than he was as president amongst people. And I think both people, Gore and Carter, have kind of found their calling. Habitat for Humanity, the environment. I am in favor of the environment, by the way. I'm not like a ultra-liberal tree hugger, but I'm like, yeah, don't fucking pollute, you moron. But they get George W. Bush. What's going to be his policy? But then he gets one when 9/11 happens. I was on the bus when it happened, and I remember that happening. That gave a cause. And that actually unified the Democrats and Republicans. And honestly, this was an early warning sign, but a lot of Democrats not only supported the war in Afghanistan, which is kind of understandable, but the less well-conceived war in Iraq, and more importantly, the Patriot Act. The wars are one thing. Not good. But the Patriot Act, that was the beginning of the modern megalith state. And then you had 2004, you had Hurricane Katrina coming in 2005. You had a lot of events that made Bush less popular. He won against Kerry pretty easily. Not a big deal. Kerry wasn't really a serious contender, just as Bob Dole hadn't been to Clinton in 96. Because it's hard to defeat an incumbent. It really is. Happened once with Carter, happened once with Bush Sr., but generally speaking, a president gets a second term. Then in 2008, the bailouts happened. That is something I fucking hate. The whole too big to fail. That is a corporation who isn't owning up to their poor financial decisions, holding their employees' jobs as hostage, like, oh, you have to let us keep on going, or these people will lose their jobs, you'll lose your government contracts. And in maybe a few instances, that's true. But for the most part, if you're going to be a capitalist, you have to just, succeed or fail on your merits. Here's the thing, if those people lost their jobs, they'd find new ones. Other corporations would come to take the place, better corporations. But this really goes to show you where government really values. We've debated for decades if we should give health care to all citizens. But when it comes to financial support, a safety net, isn't it funny that the current government gives more social aid to companies than it does people? That's our tax money. Instead of taxpayer dollars going to help people, they go to help corporations. So, we get Obama. A junior senator that came out of nowhere, and he ran on a platform of change. And this was still a continuation of the Clinton Democrat Party. But they came in, they're going to change this, they're going to do that. New face, and nothing changed. Not really. The wars in Afghanistan and even Iraq, for at least a time, would continue. Healthcare for all. Well, sort of. Obamacare. ACA. It's funny how if you say Obamacare, a lot of people don't like it, but if you say ACA, people do. He did push for that, but of course there was a ton of pushback. And that's just it. Somehow whenever the government is up for doing something for companies, it goes through. But when it's for the people, it's an uphill battle. Funny that. So I'm not going to completely blame Obama because I feel like he had some ideas, but when he got in, the reality of Washington, D.C. set in real quick. So he pretty much continued Clinton-era policies. He did get Osama bin Laden. That was pretty cool. Hey, you love that. Mitt Romney gave him more of a run for his money in 2012 than Kerry had and Dole had before, but yeah, Obama won re-election pretty handily. Popular guy. Unlike Clinton, we didn't have any sex scandals, nothing like that. Oh yeah, and he's black. But I think that's one thing to keep in mind, that does his color, his race matter? It shouldn't. But somehow the Democrat Party, virtue signaling and SJW is taking over at this point. But what about the Republican Party? The Republicans are kind of now the rudderless ship. Reagan had reinvigorated them. They carried that for a while. Obviously, George W. Bush carried on some of the same policies. Heck, even had some of the same people. Dick Cheney had been in the orbit of his father. But it was pretty controversial, even unpopular by 2008. And after 8 years of Obama being so popular, the Republicans really are searching for an identity. They're seen as the party of big business, big corporation, old white men. But they are gaining ground in the South. The solid South has now been broken. It's no longer Democrat. Remember, in 2000, that's when Florida went Republican. Before that, it had been Democrat. Now it's a stronghold of the Republicans. But who are they going to run in 2016? Jeb Bush? What? I don't know Jeb. He's probably an alright guy, but about as milquetoast, uninspiring as you can get. Not to mention the whole idea of having your last three presidents be Bush. Bush, 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 Bush. This isn't a 70s porn. We don't need that much Bush. This is when Bill Clinton, there we go, Donald Trump steps in, who had been a Democrat, at least a Democrat supporter, who'd even donated before to the Clintons. He had a long-standing beef at this point with Barack Obama over things, including the whole birther thing, the birth certificate thing. Basically, Donald Trump just doing Donald Trump things, stirring the pot, basically being the OG troll. He came in and he smashed the Republican Party in 2015, 2016. He was an outsider. He was never in politics. You had all the people that said all these things about him. You had J.D. Vance himself calling him Hitler at one point. He bulldozed through. He was uncouth, even despicable. And he defeated and even converted most of his critics in 2016. It's amazing to me, the Republicans that fell in line with him. Now, some of the stuff he said and did, I could understand being forgivable. It's just politics. But when Trump brought in people's wives and children, I don't know how you do that. But again, it's business, it's politics. They did. In a very weird way, in a very grassroots way, not completely dissimilar to Carter in 1976. Trump took a completely useless party, a weak, flaccid party. Trump was the Republican Party's Viagra. How about we just say it like that? So he wins the nomination, much to many folks' amazement, myself included, in 2016. But the Democrats, who are they going to run? Well, they actually have a populist, a very popular person of their own, Bernie Sanders. There was a lot of excitement for Bernie Sanders amongst labor, amongst Northerners, even amongst Southerners, even amongst independents, because he was kind of one of them, libertarians. He was even pro-2A. At least he said he was, and I don't think he spends a whole lot of time thinking about guns one way or the other. He definitely didn't have an anti-gun thing on him. And he seemed to be sincere. And he was really popular. It would have been fascinating to see Bernie and Trump go at it in 2016. So the Democrats are set. They've got another populist person like Biden before. And nope. They pull the whole super delegate card. Because they wanted Hillary. The establishment wanted Hillary. Just as the establishment in the Republican Party wanted another Bush, the establishment in the Democrat Party wanted another Clinton, who had also been directly involved in the Obama administration. Man, this is just sounding incestuous, isn't it? Hillary, while a smart woman, you cannot say otherwise. She is intelligent and ruthless. No one ever said she was too weak to be president, much to the contrary. She is not popular here in Arkansas. She is not popular in the country. She was nowhere near as popular and unifying, nowhere near able to make the coalition like Bernie Sanders would have. But since Bernie was a party outsider, just as Trump had been a party outsider for the Republicans, the powers that be at the top didn't want him. But here's the difference. The Republican Party eventually, after kicking and screaming, listened to their voters, let Donald Trump run in and win an open primary, and he became their nominee, and they fell in line. When it looked like Bernie might just win, the Democrat Party changed the rules, pulled the shenanigan, lied to us. They deserved to win. They deserved to lose in 2016 because they didn't go with what democracy said. I'm not saying Bernie would have been a good president. Frankly, I think he would be. But Hillary, she might have been a good president, but she would have been an unpopular one. More importantly, she was not what not just the Americans wanted. She was not what Democrat voters wanted. But she had money, and she spent. And she had big rallies and celebrity endorsements. She was a woman, and she was going to break the glass ceiling. She was running against a man that had been taken to court and lost in court or settled out of court, a man that had been accused of being a racist, a man that had been accused of sexism. A thoroughly unlikable man by most accounts, at least unless you loved him. But then half the time when people loved him and got to know him closer, it flipped. A man who kind of perved on his own daughter a little bit, maybe. Who knows? And he beat her. Because he is what people wanted, and people wanted a change. Isn't it funny? People keep wanting a change. In 2008, change. In 2016, change. It's almost as if people are tired of that establishment. The establishment that bailed out corporate oligarchs. The establishment that started 2 wars with really no end in sight. The establishment that would not really deliver health care except the very vaguest things under the ACA, which Obama and his supporters had to struggle just to get that. An establishment that has all the time and money in the world for billionaires. But if you make under $1 million a year, get in line. Sit back and tell us what you want. We're not going to listen. And then we're going to tell you what you want and what's best for you. I know, I met some of those folks back when I was in college and grad school. Sit down, shut up, and do as we tell you to do. And Donald Trump was a rejection of that. And when he was giving his speech after accepting, he said he would be a president for all Americans. And I said, let's see what happens. I'll be honest. I knew it would get with Hillary, and it would just be the same economics and the same corporate nepotism. Trump said he would drain the swamp, do all this other stuff, shake it up. And if nothing else, I thought he might scare both parties into changing to be more responsive to the people. Is that what happened? Peanut? Is that what happened? No. Is that what happened? Do you know? Yeah. Came in because my feet are cold, and my hands are cold, and my dishes are done. No, of course it's not fucking what happened. The Democrats didn't learn a damn thing. But Trump didn't do pretty much anything he said either. Surprise, surprise. The Democrats just said that people were sexist, and, I don't know, still probably said racist. They ended up accusing Bernie Sanders of that, even though he got screwed over. Even though he would have been the people's choice, frankly. Even though 8 years later, he's still very popular, even though he's technically older than Joe Biden. Yeah. And Trump, for his part, did he drain the swamp? No. He did exactly what you'd expect a billionaire financial playboy who had gone through how many bankruptcies? 5, 6? Who had been on a reality TV show from Hollywood. Kind of reminds me of Andrew Jackson a bit. He got in there, he gave his friends and family appointments, he tweeted a whole lot, started building a little wall, a little bit. But when serious things happened, like that Vegas shooting, he very quickly bent the knee to the establishment. He really did. Because it didn't matter to him. Yes, nut butt. You want to jump up here? 1 sec. One of the things that Trump said during the campaign this year was, were you better off 4 years ago? No! Because 4 years ago, we were in the depths of COVID lockdown. It's interesting to me how the whole COVID thing has been shifted to the Democrats and Biden, but the first near year of it was under Trump and the Republicans. And you know what? The Democrats let them get away with that. They didn't call them out. Now look, COVID was a once-in-a-century thing. No one knew how to deal with it. Trump was on kind of one end of let's just do business as usual. There were others in the government and medical community that wanted to bubble wrap everything. And probably the right answer was somewhere in between. But keep in mind, all the lockdowns, all the mandates did happen under Trump's administration. Again, he acquiesced. Although his public speeches about it were interesting, to say the least. Now, we're not going to rehash his presidency, but it wasn't sunshine and rainbows. It wasn't Hitler's Germany either. It just was. He mostly used it as a platform to talk and a way to further his business ventures and promote his family. Now, that sounds not good, but it's not like the Democrats haven't done that either. So 2020, I think if COVID had not happened, Trump would have easily won re-election. but it did. And not only did a lot of folks not like how he handled it, not only was the war in Afghanistan still going on 3 presidents later after it was started under Bush, but now people are at home with time, and they start listening to his speeches. And what do the Democrats do? Obviously, the Republicans are going to nominate Trump as their candidate because, he's the incumbent president. The Democrats go with Joe Biden. The true definition of a Washington insider. Obama's vice president. Were there primaries? I don't know, probably on paper. But frankly, it just seems like he was the anointed nominee. I don't remember any strong challengers in 2020, do you? It was Biden. But he was smart about it. The Republicans criticized him for just keeping his head down in the basement. Guess what? You can't out-talk Donald Trump. And the media wouldn't let you anyway because they love reporting on Donald Trump. No, Biden handled it properly. He just let Trump talk. He let Trump be his own worst enemy, and he let COVID come down on his head and get ribbed for that. And he won. He took the right tactic. Because Joe Biden, at least when he was still all mentally there, very smart political operator. And in some ways, I think one of the last Republican Democrats, doesn't matter, last Democrats of that old New Deal mannerism. Because he came in 20 years before Clinton. I'm not saying he was FDR. That's been claimed lately. That's silly. But there is a little bit of that old school, folksy labor, pro-people thing in Biden that later Democrats often lack. I don't know. I'm trying to put my finger on it. But you know what I mean? There's a little bit of that vestige in him of what made the Democrat Party so popular from the 30s through the 60s. And again, he ran on change. Also, let's go back to normal. Again, guys, we're about to see it. I hope I'm wrong, but I think we're about to see the tweets and all that come back. Although Trump is older, maybe he's mellowed out. Who knows? But those 4 years under Trump were just a daily thing of what's next. A, Trump would say something stupid on a tweet. B, the media would flip their lids over it, beating themselves off to report on it. And it was just an ongoing cycle of Trump talking and the media talking about Trump. And it was so just tiring and exhausting. It's like, there's other things going around the world, guys, besides Trump. Can we just shut up about him for a minute? No? Oh, okay. So Biden comes in, does his thing. And in the first 6 months, the honeymoon period, pretty popular. Although he never really did crack 45% or so favorability rating, as best I can recall. But unlike other previous dudes who've lost the election, Trump never went away. He kept fighting the results of 2020. He kept carrying on. He kept doing new business ventures. And the media just kept on reporting about him. It really did not feel like Biden was president, at least not after the first 6 months or year. It was still mostly Trump. And so no one's surprised. The Republicans kind of won back quite a bit in 2022. That's a pretty common thing. And then no one's surprised Biden didn't usher in the change everyone thought. My God, you elected someone who was nearly 80, who'd been in the party more in his life than he had been out of it. He is the establishment. What do you think's going to happen? Also, the economy's not great. Yeah, what do you think's going to happen when you print money like that? Again, everyone wants to give the Democrats grief for all the stimulus checks. Remember when Trump insisted that his signature be on the checks, not the Treasury? Yeah, the first checks came from Trump, but the Democrats continued them. Just as like the first bailouts came from Bush in '08, and Obama continued them in '09. Funny that. And it just got worse and worse. The war in Ukraine kicked off. Then the Gaza thing happened. Neither of which I think Biden has much to do with as people want to give credit for. And of course, here you have Trump sitting on the sidelines going, I'd have done a better job. I'd have fixed it. How? I would. Trust me, bro. How? I would. Just trust me. Oh, okay. And then we come to this year. And then the soul-crushing realization that Biden is running for another term at the age of 81. And he would turn 82 before taking his second term. Skippy. That's great. I'm so fucking excited. But don't worry, he's sharp. Everyone's telling us he's sharp. All right. He looks all right in his events and things. The good State of the Union who are there. There was that jacked up Joe thing, which I thought was hilarious. Far from a condemnation of him that the Republicans thought it was. It seemed like a good thing. And it's like, oh, he's on medication. So what? He's 70, he's 81. He better be on medication. He's on Adderall or Ritalin or whatever. So what? So are half the kids in this country. I don't care if it makes him do his job. Awesome. Donald Trump's on trial. They're bringing all these charges. Then he gets convicted. Okay, no. He becomes the Republican nominee in an open primary. Nikki Haley gave him a decent run for his money. I'll give him that, considering his kind of status as of a quasi-incumbent candidate. But the Republicans did let it go. And at this point, the Republican Party is his party. Because he's the only one in there that really has that something. And what does the Democrat Party do? Nope, Joe Biden. Now again, he's an incumbent president, so that's kind of a given. But there should have been more discussion of the age thing, and there just was not. And then after the disastrous first debate, he steps down. But he doesn't resign the presidency. Somehow, he's not able to run for re-election and take another term, but don't worry, he can fulfill his existing term. That would have worked fine in January, before the debate. But I think afterwards, it was kind of weak sauce. I think he should have resigned the presidency. Because the Democrats were hell-bent on having Kamala Harris. There was virtually no discussion about having open primaries to pick another candidate. Nope. It's her. You know, again, if Biden had stepped down and she'd gone from being VP to president, then she would have been the incumbent, and that would have made sense. But that's not what they did. To their mind, she was perfect. She was a woman. She was a minority. She was younger. What's not to love? What are her policies? No. What are her plans? What are her goals? Who's her VP going to be? To be fair, this is why I really don't think this was planned from the get-go, because she came in so unprepared. Who knows, though. But Biden stepped down. It's got to be someone. So they very quickly anoint her, and she starts off on her 100-some-odd day campaign for being president. And by she, I mean the party. The Democrat Party wants the party of the working person back to FDR, the party of labor, the party of civil rights, thanks to Johnson, the party of kind of centrist economics because of Bill Clinton, that had been moving more and more into corporate pockets, had frankly become the party of big business. Now, and Hollywood and celebrities, they picked her. She did not pick them. And you start to see endorsements and all this stuff come in. And in the beginning, I think it worked because she was the scrappy underdog. Now she's the young person. Trump's the old person. He looks like he's the establishment. He's got the big money behind him. But it starts to get bad. They start talking about how much money Harris has raised. Up to $1 billion. Oh no. Hillary had a lot of money too. They start getting more and more celebrity endorsements. Oh no. That's sounding familiar too. They start doing these lavish, arena-filled rallies. Hillary did that too. They're doing the same old thing they always did. There were a couple of things that Harris seemed to be passionate about. Abortion rights, body autonomy rights is one of them. But Americans, right or wrong, this is how democracy works, we're concerned about the border, the economy, and foreign engagements, namely this year Gaza arose. And Biden is an unpopular presidency. And it only got worse when he ran and then didn't run, and it got confusing. These are things that the Harris campaign really danced around. Didn't want to talk, the economy is great, don't worry about it. Here are some numbers. And you know what? Even if the numbers are true, which I have my doubts about just because they can be easily manipulated, they really only apply to things like the NASDAQ, the stock market, rich people things, corporate things. Corporate was doing good under Biden, at least comparatively. But prices were rising, inflation was up. Maybe it stabilized, maybe there were some jobs. Sure, that's good. Again, I think there's still something decent about Biden. But he's an old man who's just kind of going with the flow. People don't feel it. They never found a way to message about the economy that worked. They never found a way at all to address Gaza that worked. And he never really effectively talked about the border at all. It was very dismissive. And they kept celebrating women, and that's good. I mean, I'm married to a woman. I like women. But they kept beating the woman drum over and over. Guys, you're running a woman. What about other people? I don't know. I could go on and on. There's a bunch of just feelings like, you're a minority. You have to vote Democrat because Trump's a racist. Never mind that we called Bernie Sanders a racist earlier. It doesn't matter. It's almost as if you keep calling people something over and over and over just when you don't like them, it kind of loses all meaning. Funny that. But of course, the switchover in July just confused people. Some folks didn't even know Biden had dropped out. In fact, that poll that was done Election Day and right after, where people were like, wait, is Joe Biden, the number one trending Google search thing, that cracked me up. What started off as feeling like a scrappy underdog by the end, by October, just felt like a manufactured, paint-by-numbers Democrat campaign, more about what someone is than what they believe in and what they're going to do. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, who I don't think morally is a very good human being at all, People know who he is. And one of the simple facts about a Democrat voting system, people will sometimes just vote for the name they know, even if they don't like him, just because he's a name they know. And thanks to the media never letting Trump slip from the headlines all these years, everyone knows Trump. And now you've got a whole group of young voters that all they remember is the lockdowns and all that. And the Democrats just kept taking blame. Trump would blame them for Ukraine and Gaza. They just took it. Never really messaged back. He blamed them for the open borders. They just took it. Never really messaged back. Blamed them for COVID. And just took it. Never messaged back. And on top of all that, you have the screw up with the nomination. You have so much big corporate interest involved. Oof. The Harris messaging played to people's hopes, tried to, whereas Trump played to people's fears. This time, people gave in to their fears more than let themselves hope. And one key thing, Harris never disavowed the Biden administration. The whole, her going on The View thing is often brought up, but time and time again, she basically tried to work with and be in lockstep with Biden. And that would have been fine if Biden had been popular like Reagan. After all, that's pretty much how George H. Bush won in '88. But when your president is so unpopular, you need to break with him. You need to stab him in the back. And it pains me to say that. I value loyalty and integrity a lot. I value sticking with your friends. But do you want to win this fucking thing or not? And siding with Biden wasn't going to win it. But that's only Biden's fault for staying in the race, for saying he's going to run when he wasn't aware enough to do so. I'm not saying if she'd turned on Biden, she would have won it. But trying to say that you're a candidate for change while you're also supporting what's already been done is true doublespeak. And her final message about Trump being all these bad things, she did say he was a fascist when she was asked directly. She actually never did call him Hitler, at least nothing that I can ever remember. J.D. Vance did once. She never did, but she did call him a fascist. But saying he's a very bad man, vote for me, I'm better. But I'm going to be just like Biden, but I'm also going to be change. The problem is, so much had been exaggerated about Trump over the years that it became impossible to know the truth. So many in the media were so dead set against Trump that they over-exaggerated to the point that people started going, well, they lied about this, maybe all this other stuff. No. He did do a lot of bad, dastardly, or just stupid things. But I also understand why people don't believe him, because it's the boy who cried wolf in a lot of ways. It really is. Meanwhile, it's easy enough to catch the Democrats lying about economic numbers and forecasts and all that, too. I don't like being lied to. A lot of folks don't either. And it's also just easier for a challenger to come in when there's a very unpopular administration. It's how Reagan won so easily in '80, beating the incumbent. So Harris was kind of screwed in both ways. She had all the blame of being an incumbent in an unpopular administration, but she had none of the advantages of being an incumbent, whereas like people knew her name, they knew what she was. They couldn't point to acts she had done to say, well, in actuality, she's a pretty good president, whatever. It really was the worst of both worlds. Meanwhile, Donald Trump had been president, and enough time has gone by, people have kind of forgotten the bad, and they've kind of reinvented the past, and they've looked at his term with rose-tinted glasses. Now, we all do that. The Clinton administration and the Obama administration withstanding. And then, of course, you have the Harris campaign really cozying up to Liz Cheney. Now, talking about if Liz Cheney stood up on principle against Trump, that's a whole other thing. But the Cheneys are not popular Republicans. The party that rejected Bernie Sanders is now embracing Cheneys. That just seems weird if you're still the party of the people, party of labor, all that. Meanwhile, you've got Trump saying he is. I don't believe him. But you know what? People don't really like where things are right now. He says he'll fix it all. Just trust him, bro. The Democrats are flip-flopping around, not just on policies, but on their candidate for the first time in history. Yeah, 2024 was going to be a historic election between the candidate that had 100 days to run and the candidate who has 34 felonies. Both were pretty damn disadvantaged, frankly. I've heard it said that Harris ran a perfect campaign. And to some extent, I agree. It was perfect in that it was the cookie cutter, by the book, ideal way the Democrat Party has wanted to run campaigns since the Clinton era. Not so much considered ideal in that she really lost. Not like a little bit lost, like really lost. This is the first time in quite a while the non-incumbent Republican has won the popular vote, not to mention the Electoral College. Now, are the original projections true that Biden would have even lost more bigly than Harris? I mean, who's to say? Probably, but who's to say? Trump, on the other hand, ran, frankly, a horrendous campaign. Didn't have a lot of groundwork, relied on Musk and others to outsource stuff, had very uneven speeches, long rambling ones at times, sometimes seeming low energy, didn't have near the celebrity endorsements of Harris. Although it has to be mentioned, the assassination attempt, and the second one, if you want to count it, but it's really kind of here and there, did bolster. I mean, that's just human nature. If someone nearly dies, we extend sympathies to them. So he did everything wrong for the most part, and she did everything right for the most part. So why was it a significant blowout? Well, you know, as mentioned, Trump did appeal to people's fears. And Trump is one of those people that if you are loyal and love him, he will say, I love you. I'll give him that credit. And he has been president before, and he hasn't been in office the last 4 years, so he can pick apart from the outside. He's very good at that. Always has been. Very good critic. I mean, that's why The Apprentice, you're fired is such a deal. It also seems like the nation as a whole just didn't care much about January 6th and wanted to move on. Okay, that's how, popular support, popular opinion works in a democracy. In the Democrats, the Jack Smith and all that, it was still going. And then the whole New York trial. That was never adequately explained to people. Anyway, it just came across as weird, even though actually the DOJ didn't do that. Again, Democrats never defended themselves with any competency at all. And honestly, those two cases, I'm like, honestly thought the classified documents case in Florida and the case in Georgia over the phone call and other things had more weight if we're going to go there. But that's neither here nor there. We could get into all kinds of stuff. I would say that by perception, it seems like the Democrats weren't just content to rig their own primaries anymore, as they did in 2016 and frankly 2024. And a lot of people felt like now they're trying to rig the Republican primaries. I'm not saying that's true or false, but that does seem to be the perception. And the Democrats relying on more traditional media, like their people would go on things like Jimmy Kimmel. Meanwhile, Trump went on Joe Rogan. And why Kamala didn't go on there, I don't know that that was a decision she herself made. But whichever staffer, and if it was her, this goes to her too, decided that was a fucking idiot. The thing is, she would have gone on there and he would have treated her with courtesy and politeness, because I've watched him interview lots of people. Sometimes crazy out there ideas like lizard people, flat earth. He still treats them with respect. Also keep in mind that Joe Rogan was quote unquote a liberal not long ago. Now, I like the guy. He and I disagree over Ukraine, but that doesn't matter. It's okay to disagree. Her not going on there was a huge blunder. In fact, those big old arena things with all that celebrity appearance and all that glitz, it worked against her. Instead of making her feel like amongst the people, it made her feel like she's the elite. She's hobnobbing with people you could never even hope to even shake hands with. And meanwhile, Trump is just kind of trumping. You know, the whole McDonald's stunt, it seemed goofy. And then him accusing her of never even working at McDonald's, she never even responded to that. But she did. It's just not on every one of her resumes. Such an easy rebuttal. But I think there is this attitude that they're so superior, they didn't have to stoop to respond to his accusations. And they absolutely did. They needed to. They did not, but they should have. So Trump even got that narrative. Basically, they yielded every battlefield when it came to it. And that just worked against him. I mean, it's quite obvious. And then the whole thing. And then the spending of the money. Where did that $1 billion come from? Yes, some were from average people. Most were from major corporate donors and billionaires. What does that tell you? Who wants the Democrat in? The narrative was she would be good for minorities, women, Hispanics, blacks, disabled people like myself. But the reality is, based on the votes, a lot of those did not feel that way. On the other hand, the Democrat Party has become more and more corporate Democrat over the last 30 years. And she felt like the corporate Democrat candidate, and the more money she raised and the way they chose to spend it, instead of going all on, online alternative things and doing all this, they went on the podcast, that whatever so-and-so daddy thing. I never even heard of that person. None of us did. They went on Howard Stern. How relevant is that? Yet how do you go on Howard Stern and pass up Joe Rogan? The fuck? It was just so out of touch. It almost felt like Joe Biden, at his age, was picking this stuff, not someone younger. It did not have that feel of, even though she is a younger candidate, it was ran as a campaign like it always had been by older people. Now, I'm going to give Harris some slack here. Again, with only 100 some odd days to become president, potentially, she wasn't exactly going to get a lot of time to put hands on. Another thing that griped me, this was around, I guess, Labor Day. She had a, Harris website. There was a big donate button. You know what there wasn't originally? A policies page. Look, I understand it might take time to really solidify what you're standing for, your policies, really iron out the details. But you know what? with all that money, hire someone to make a temporary page, something. That was a horrible look, to be saying, give us money, and not even say, these are our general policies. And speaking of, Harris and other Democrats have been saying, we're going to do a tax credit. We're going to give $5,000 to first-time homeowners, or a tax credit to people with kids, or blah, 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 blah. I understand in theory that sounds good. People don't like getting a check from the government. At least most people don't. They will accept it, like during COVID when we all had to, but no one feels good. And I mean that in general terms, you know what I mean. There are some people that don't give a rip, but people, generally speaking, don't feel good with handouts. They would much rather get a tax cut. In fact, people would rather have a $3,000 reduction in their taxes than they would a $5,000 check or something similar from the government. Likewise, they would rather have the price of gas go down than to get some kind of subsidy from the government. That's just how people's minds work, especially Americans. And yet they didn't play on that. And then when Trump went at his tariff plan, they did not ride that the hardest. They actually didn't even really address the point about the consequences of tariffs, not as much as they should have. Although they did trot out the so-and-so economic Harvard professors and analysis. Look, I have a master's degree. I do enjoy and appreciate education. But the Democrat Party is getting too elitist when it comes to education. Especially if they're trying to get the working class vote from, labor and from minorities. Again, just like with that celebrity stuff and all the money, it's not a good look for them. It makes them seem snobby and egotistical. Again, this is perception. And ironically, Trump, even though he's a billionaire, who has been a billionaire his whole life, or at least a millionaire, and craps in a gold crapper, he has been successfully able to message to people that he's blue collar. Now, I don't think it's, again, true, but this is politics for you. So why did Trump win? He was more effective at messaging. He used newer sources to attack and to connect with people. And while, of course, he spent lots of money, he didn't rely on it. In fact, it's just kind of the same tactic he used in 2016 against Hillary. And at that time, I was hopeful that that would show the Democrat Party they needed to get with the times. But their win in 2020 with Biden, the most conventional and traditional of them all, that whole campaign, gave them this weird sense of security. Also, they just seem to have this obsession about getting the first woman president. I'm fine with that. Britain had Margaret Thatcher and all that. Lots of nations have had female leaders. That's not the issue. It's that they seem like they want a female candidate, and that's the virtue in and of itself. Not that, hey, this is an intelligent human being who'd make it for a good president, and just incidentally, it's a woman. I think that would work. But to go, what's good about her? Oh, she's a woman and a minority. Those aren't qualifications. Those are just what we are. And speaking, again, as someone who's disabled, I would not want to get a job just because I was disabled. In fact, I would find that very pandering and insulting. And I think that's how a lot of voters felt. Especially when you went onto the website and there wasn't policies originally. And when they were going to run Biden and then they went, I don't know. I don't know. And then all the big money being behind the Democrats now. They really have flipped with the Republicans. And again, this isn't reality. This is perception. The Republican Party now is perceived as the blue-collar, working-class party, and the Democrat Party is now perceived as the elitist, Hollywood, corporate party. So what's the reality? Well, this is really just more for fun than anything else. What would a potential Harris presidency look like? To put it briefly, business as usual, status quo, with a few things thrown in just for like special interests. For example, under Obama, he was pretty status quo. Okay, he tried for the ACA, the Obamacare. But for the most part, it was status quo. The thing is, to get things done in D.C., you have to do that. At least the way things are right now. But people seem fed up with that. It seems like Harris would have really focused on women, maybe on abortion rights. That might have been her version of Obamacare. But otherwise, there'd be a credit here, a credit there. But I can't see where a whole lot would change. That was Peanut, by the way. Just flopping around. And how would this do internationally? I think domestically, her presidency could have been all right. If a bit bland and corporate and overly, not, I guess, sensitive. I don't know. I'm trying to think of sanitized. That's it. Because it definitely seems like the way Democrats, the way the Harris campaign picked issues was only if it was popular, and they tried to equivocate. And I think Gaza is a really good example of them trying to have their cake and eat it too. With saying, well, there needs to be an Israeli state, there needs to be a Palestinian state, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes you just have to pick a side. And I think in international politics, Gaza would have not gone well under Harris because of, frankly, the culture of the Middle East. And she doesn't have much international background, aside from some as vice president. I don't know that America has much they can do about Gaza, to be honest, no matter who's president. That is a situation that actually predates the USA in a lot of senses. And both sides have deeply held beliefs and long memories and deep grievances against the other. I don't know there's much the U.S. can do there. Ukraine. I don't know either. I do like that. I do feel like the Harris administration would have been pro-Zelensky, pro-Ukraine. I do agree with that. I'm very much pro-Ukrainian on this. Ukraine did nothing wrong. That is just the fact. But how successful she would have been is an extension of Biden dealing with Putin. That's questionable. And again, how much the U.S. could really leverage there is also questionable. We're not exactly directly there. This is a Russia-Ukraine thing. We're just kind of there providing arms. Kind of like we were to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. I don't know. But I can tell you this. If Harris had been president, Fox News, Newsmax, and the others would ride her relentlessly. She did not have clear policy goals. She did not have time. I'm not even sure how much she wanted to be president. I think she would have been just another continuation of Biden in the popularity department too. Another 40 some odd percent, 40 to 45% approval. I don't know much would have been done about the border. I think the economy is going to be okay no matter what, because usually the economy is kind of set by the previous administration, or even the one before that. The president has far less control over the economy than people give them credit for. But when you're a leader, you take responsibility and can get credit or blame for stuff that may not be your doing. That's just kind of, buck stops here at the top. In other words, I think a Harris presidency would have been fine, but I think it would have been lukewarm, milquetoast, establishment. And I think there would be some crumbs given to the average citizen, a break here, a break there. But as we've seen over the last several years, most of the breaks would be given to big media, corporate. We had to be very thankful for the crumbs we got. And of course, it would be a cavalcade of first woman president and talking more about that stuff. Pronouns, I don't know. Even on the abortion thing, I'm not sure. Democrats have had so many chances to put into law abortion rights, and they seem very content to let courts do it because it's such a hot button issue. I think we would see a divide between what Democrats say they stand for and who they actually fight for. If they actually stood for the things they say they do, this would be an entirely different situation. On paper, a lot of the stuff, like, fair wages, equality for working people, it's fine. But would we actually get that? Probably not in huge amounts. So, what about a second Trump term that's coming to be? Well, the good news here for people is we don't have to wait much longer. Not even 2 months, and we'll know. And it's hard to say. We do know what his first term was like. Will the second one be much the same? I think one difference, Donald Trump is older now, and he does seem more tired. My interpretation of him, he's lost a certain fire. I even wonder if, because of all of his court cases, that really gave him a reason to fight hard to become president again, on top of everything else. Kind of wonder if in an alternate universe, if they just let all that drop after 2021, I should say, if we'd be here and now. If he didn't feel backed into a corner. I don't know. Again, who's to say? Again, I don't think he's a good guy. I do think he has wronged people. Here's the thing. So what? Point to any other billionaire, even millionaire. Most of them, let's take for example Dick Cheney, have done just as bad things as Trump, if not worse. That doesn't make it right. No one should be above the law in this country. And Donald Trump was attempted to be held to account. That would be a lot more noble if other politicians were held to account. But they're not. So how is Donald Trump different? Is it because he's the worst of the worst when it comes to politicians? No. It's because he's an establishment outsider and he dared to buck the system. Why couldn't he be a good person, or at least a decent person, who dared to buck the system? Two things can be true at once. And that's kind of where we're at with that. the hypocrisy is pretty apparent. Kind of going back to the media. If they just stuck to reporting on if they had just stuck to reporting on what he did, but they weren't content with that. They had to embellish it. They had to make him the modern day Hitler. And that's a bridge too far. Of course, Trump did not help himself by saying he would be a day one dictator. Then again, as I said earlier, Trump, he's the biggest troll of them all. He can't help but needle people and say things just to get people going, get a rise out of them. The problem is, when is he serious and when is he just kind of acting like he's on 4chan? I have no idea. No one else does either. I think it was the day after the election that the New York Times said that Donald Trump has promised so many things to so many people. Half the people say he won't do the stuff he says he will do, and the other half says he'll do everything he says he'll do. So, very quickly, half of his supporters are going to be disappointed. It's just a matter of which half. Is he going to go full bore, or is he going to do very little of what he says? I don't know. Trump is unpredictable, and Trump can be impulsive. And we don't know how age is going to affect him either, one way or the other. But a second term, what would he do? First off, a couple of hot takes. RFK Jr. isn't all that bad. In fact, RFK Jr. cracks me the hell up. The bear story, the whale story. Yeah, he's an anti-vaxxer. On the other hand, he has good environmental policies and good things. I don't know where that's going to go. He's a character. We'll see. Elon Musk. I think dude just wants friends. You know what, though? He's the only one seriously working towards space travel, and if you've been on this channel, even the main one, you'll know I'm a huge proponent of the U.S. not just returning to space, but regaining our supremacy there. China is going to the moon sooner or later. Russia, well, they're the only game in town, really. The U.S. has tried with Boeing. We saw how well that's going. The guys are still up there. And NASA is it's given away, and that's okay. NASA was never meant to be the leader forever. They were meant to get it going. SpaceX, while it has had a couple of hurdles and road, speed bumps on the road recently, does seem like the best hope. And I do like him going to Mars. So let's do it. If Trump can enable him to actually do that, honestly, I'll forgive a lot. Because beyond almost anything else, us getting out into space and staying there is the only way our species going into the distant future survives. As far as international stuff, again, I don't know how much the U.S. can really do for Gaza, the situation there. I don't know. Trump could go one way or the other. My gut is he'll kind of back Israel. So it'll be interesting to see how those Arabs that voted for him in Michigan, Minnesota react if he just pretty much gives Israel their head. But then again, he isn't a warmonger, so we'll see. Ukraine. This is another very important one to me. Please don't sell out Zelensky in Ukraine. Please. The war must end. I know that. But the Ukrainians have earned the right to their nation. It has been a free nation for 30 years. They have fought for 3 years now to keep their home. They did not start this war. And they're not being brutal about it. When Russians, even North Koreans, want to surrender or defect, they're not chopping their heads off and things like that. And Zelensky has really arisen to the challenge. I think before it, he was kind of a mediocre leader, a former TV celebrity. But he has really shown himself to be much more than I think even he knew he could be. I do think with Putin, if Putin gets to the point, I'm not saying he's there, but if he gets to the point where he can negotiate, is willing to end the war, he will only do so if he can save face. He's a very machismo guy, perceives himself as very strong, and Putin is a very intelligent man. That's hard to deny. If Kamala Harris came to it and offered to be a mediator between Zelensky and Putin, I think Putin's pride, I don't think Putin is necessarily a misogynist in that sense, but I think with his background with Biden and Obama, if Trump sits down, don't get me wrong, I don't think Putin likes Trump. I don't think he thinks Trump is an equal. However, he knows that Trump loves him and that Trump is kind of on his side. And more importantly, the Russian people, well, they kind of laugh at Trump. I'm just telling you the truth. He's kind of a joke over there. They're more willing to negotiate with Trump than a Democrat. And I'm hoping if, this is a huge if, Putin wants to find a way out of this war to save face, Trump could be a useful conduit. Now, will Ukraine get Crimea back? No. Russia's had it for 10 years. They're going to have to give up on that hope and dream. And they might have to give up one or two border areas or heavily Russian ethnic regions. But if that's what peace costs, and if the other end of it is maybe Russia has to, and this will have to be kept on the quiet because of Putin's pride, if Russia would help Ukraine rebuild, essentially pay reparations to the Ukrainians, that could be sold as, well, they bought the land effectively. And to Russia, Putin could go home saying, look, we won the war, we added to the Russian Empire, as it happens. Sorry, Russian Federation. You know what I mean? It lets Putin go home and say it was worth something. And then Trump can say it too. I don't know. But if Trump's solution is, well, Zelensky roll over and give Putin half of Ukraine, fuck off, no. Even if that happened, the half of Ukraine given away to Russia would never stop fighting him. It would be a thorn in the side of Russia that would cause the nation to bleed resources and men for generations. It would further weaken Russia. So by saying, essentially, ending the war and going to the pre-2022 border, it's not only good for Ukraine, ultimately it's good for Russia. Because right now this war is destroying Russia every bit as much as it's hurting Ukraine. And it's allowing China to take advantage of the situation. It's weakening Russia and strengthening China. And that's not good for the U.S. Because if Russia is more or less successful in Ukraine, there's a very high likelihood that China will make a move on Taiwan. If Russia ultimately loses in Ukraine, then it will hopefully curb China's ambitions in Taiwan. And we really want that, because if China makes a move on Taiwan, it is horrible news for the USA. No matter what we do or don't do in that case, we lose. The world loses. That's just a flashpoint that never needs to come up. And Ukraine, to some extent, is a proxy war for China right now. So if having Trump in somehow allows the Ukrainian situation to end, and it works out decently for Ukraine, I will give credit where credit is due. In fact, that outcome is worth a lot, because that's a global issue. Other things are just domestic, like the abortion issue and all that here. That's domestic. We'll see. As far as the Project 2025 stuff, it's really funny. I don't know. It's a huge document. It says so many things. We'll see. I don't know. I can't even tell you what he may or may not go with on there. I think him saying he knew nothing of it was a bold-faced lie. But that's nothing new. That's not at all shocking. Whatever. Democrats have also lied plenty, so whatever. I don't know how things will go under Trump. I don't know if he'll do his tariffs. I don't know how he'll deal with immigration. I don't know. But what I can tell you is he was an unpopular president back the first time. Just as unpopular as Joe Biden. And after a honeymoon period, unless he is drastically changed, he'll go back to being an unpopular president. So yippee skippy. We're probably returning to another 4 years of an unpopular presidency. Good news is, looks like MSNBC is going away, so thank God for that. Ugh. In fact, I would be perfectly happy if all the traditional news, quote unquote, just goes away. It's all just gotten to be grossly biased anymore. I'm sick to death of it. You know, I was thinking the other day, whatever happened to reporting? Where people actually sent reporters, interviewers out into the field. They investigated, they interviewed people. Now it's just people sitting behind a desk talking about videos on YouTube and other people's speeches, and it's all just commentary. Reminds me of those YouTube videos where you've got someone commenting on someone else's video. In that video, the person's commenting on someone else's video. It's like, how many layers deep does this Matryoshka video go? I'm sick to death of it. So why did Harris lose? Because people are sick of the establishment. She said nothing really revolutionary. And she just didn't make herself well known to people. The Democrats let the Republicans, namely Trump, of course, control the narrative. They showed themselves to be weak. They also showed themselves to really suck at money management, because she raised $1 billion. Where did that money go? How did a campaign that you lost burn through that much money in just over 3 months? Where did that money go? Jesus Christ. You are idiots. You would have been better off getting Kamala Harris and a few moderators in front of a computer with a good mic and just having her do a live stream on YouTube or on X or whatever Wednesday nights. Just having Americans log on and ask her questions and have her answer them. Then spending all this money on celebrity endorsements and everything else in between. Look, trying anything else would have been better because you lost, and you lost bad. But I don't think there was much hope of her winning in the very beginning because of the Biden's running thing. The minute Biden said he was running, I think it was on life support. As for Trump, here's the honest fact. Personally, I stand to lose nothing with him as president. I'm not on disability. I'm not on Medicaid. Don't get anything from the government like that. In fact, I pay in my taxes. I pay for my own health insurance every month, which is a huge chunk off of me. I'm not a minority. I'm not a woman. I sell guns for a living. It's funny, in this campaign, you heard Kamala Harris talk more about owning guns than Trump. But again, Trump is a felon right now, so he really can't talk about owning guns, I suppose. I would probably do fine, even benefit under the Trump administration. I was worried, trying to be a decent human being, about minorities, women, immigrants. Not me. Not myself. Wasn't worried about myself. I was worried about other people. However, a large chunk of women, especially those in like Georgia, voted for Trump. A lot of Hispanics voted for Trump. Even direct immigrants who became citizens. Black males voted for Trump. Hey, if you guys think he is going to do what's best and right for you, who might argue? The Democrat Party isn't owed your vote. It's not like, oh, you're a minority, a woman, you obviously owe your vote to the... No. It's on the Democrat Party, the candidate, Harris, to earn your vote. To persuade you. Hey, if they didn't do their job, you don't have to vote for them. And that seems to be overwhelmingly what has been said by minorities and women. Even young people voted for Trump. Okay, that did surprise me a little bit, but again, what did the Harris campaign do to really reach young people? They ran such a traditional campaign. Do you think Howard Stern is reaching young people? So from the beginning, what worried me about a Trump presidency was other people. Would they be hurt? Would they be disadvantaged? I'm not a Democrat in saying that I know what's best and let me take care of you. If grown-ass adults feel like Donald Trump is in their best interest, I'm not going to tell them they're wrong because I don't know the future. Based on his attitude and things he said, I am gravely concerned about how he might treat immigrants and Hispanics. However, if they themselves are not, that's fine. And I'm not saying that with malice or rancor. I'm being 100% sincere. Because they are themselves. They know what it's like to be talked to. It is very clear to me that Democrats often pander to people. It's not what you say that matters, it's how you say it. And that's complete bunk. Words have meaning. Attitudes have meaning. Donald Trump is not a nice person, not a good person, not even an especially just uber clever person. But what does that say about you Democrats when he handed you your ass? Probably says you're not smart enough or clever enough yourself to run this country. That said, I don't think all the votes for Trump because people really wanted him. I think there was a great number of votes for Trump that were just against the Democrats, against Harris. I think, in some extent, people voted for Trump in 2016 and 2024 to punish the establishment, to punish the Washington insiders, the establishment, not just the Democrats, but the remaining vestiges of the Republican establishment. I think some people are like myself, and they want change, and they want a new normal. They want a more populist candidate, and they know that's not really Donald Trump, but maybe he'll be such a bull in a china shop that it'll get the point through. And I really thought after 2016, the Democrats would learn something, but they apparently have not. The Republicans just basically were already a broken party with Trump, and he has taken it over as his own private fiefdom. But I mean, what else was there for them? Jeb Bush. That was a dead end. The reason Trump was able to come up through the ranks is because the Republicans have allowed, frankly, free and fair primaries. The Democrats do not. They keep having anointed people as their nominee. And if someone like Bernie Sanders is getting too close, they pull shenanigans. At this point, I don't even know why the Democrats even bother with the theater of primaries. In fact, this year they kind of didn't. The Democrats lost because they didn't deserve to win. We'll see. I'll say this. I expect a second Trump term to not be anything more than him coming in and enriching himself and rewarding those close to him. Also having all kinds of crazy tweets and odd things. He won't be half as bad as he says he will be to people, but he'll do a thing or two. And very quickly, people will start to remember what it was like having him as president before. However, I would love to be wrong. I would love for this time for him to actually drain the swamp. I would love to see peace for Ukraine and some kind of solution for the Gaza problem. I would love to see true economic reform. I'd love to see his concepts of plans produce infrastructure bill or healthcare reform. I don't think it's going to happen. I would love to be wrong. Basically, I kind of feel like it's a win-win for me. Either he does what I say and that's it, or he surprises us all and it's good for my country. Above all, I'm a patriot. Above all, I want this country to succeed because America is the last best hope for this world. Yes, I did just rip off Babylon 5. Because if we lose our dominance, it's going to be China. The world will fall under Chinese hegemony. And that'll be that. Time will go on, history will go on, but that will be the end of America as far as a power. We'll be like Britain. Day is kind of past. I don't think Trump himself can do anything major because he's old. He's tired. He's that generation that won't let go. He's older now than Biden was when he took office 4 years ago. And guys, if time has done this way to Biden, do you not think Trump stands to have the same thing happen to him? I mean, who knows? He might be like Bernie that holds up better, but there's definitely a chance that Trump will start to suffer physical or mental issues like Biden has. Why we keep electing old men to be the president, I don't know. We'll say this, if Trump were to step down and J.D. Vance were to take over, at least we'd get someone young. And someone that seems reasonably competent and definitely intelligent. J.D. Vance is an intelligent individual, love him or hate him. And he's certainly of a young generation. Hell, he's younger than I am. That's probably the best case scenario. Do you think the Democrat Party will learn their lesson this time? I don't know. Because while Harris lost, money was donated, money was spent, and the corporate norm was kept. I don't know. Trump came in and broke and now has reassembled the Republican Party. The Democrats need the same thing. That party is in shambles with no direction, and it needs a whole new group of people. And it needs to get its ass together and legitimately have primaries and open nominations directed by the people. And it just needs to get its messaging down to basics again. Instead of convoluted plans that both Hillary and Harris had, just break it down. Simple. It's another thing Trump did well. Very simple. But we'll see. This race was not Trump's to win. It was the Democrats' race to lose. The Republican candidate was flawed in just about every way a human being can be, and yet they were not able to capitalize on any of that because their flaws were just as great in other ways. And it all goes back to 2016 and how they screwed over Bernie Sanders. I do not care for Donald Trump as a human being. However, I have not cared for the Democrat Party since that time with Bernie Sanders. That outraged me. I did not like Hillary. A lot of people did protest votes in 2016. And a lot of people did protest votes in 2024. It really is kind of just the child throwing the toy against the wall to break it instead of sharing it at this point. If the Democrats won't listen to people and won't abide by their own rules and keep insisting they know what's best and telling people in a patronizing way how to behave, what to do, what to accept, then they'll just Bring Trump in just to humiliate him. Basically, a lot of people just kind of got in on the troll job. Trump is essentially the biggest troll president ever. And he drives traditional media especially nuts. And it is kind of funny. I just wish it wasn't such a deadly serious job and deadly important. I wish it wasn't people's lives and livelihoods at risk. Donald Trump is the president America deserves. For better or worse. And I don't know what more to say about that. In the end, when the election came down, was I happy or sad? Frankly, neither. I definitely was not surprised. But I can't say I would have been any happier if Harris had won. The truth is, I don't feel like we've had a president with the true moral character to lead in a very long time. Our political system seems to float mediocrity and corruption at the top. And until we get back to decent Americans, that's where it's going to stay. And I don't want Democrats to win. Not until they can actually do the right and moral thing. We know what Trump is. He's the devil we know. A Harris presidency would have been presidency by committee, backed by huge corporate money. Meh. Not to say Trump isn't backed by huge corporate money, but it's mostly Elon Musk. At least he's out there. We know who he is. I don't know, guys. I want what's best for this country. I don't blame people for voting for Trump. I understand why people voted for Harris. God, we need new people. We need a new generation who gets it, who understands the world of today and isn't stuck in the world of the past. Maybe one day we will. Because this country needs serious reform, serious change in the bureaucracy, in the economics, and just how the government does things. The government is so unpopular, so inefficient, so tied down with red tape and bureaucracy. And I don't mean when a Republican's president or a Democrat. I just mean habitually. But the answer isn't just deregulation to the point where corporations could do anything and everything they want. That's not the answer either. We're getting to a point where the foundation is so rotten that the house just has to be torn down and rebuilt. And it would be so nice if it could be done before it just falls in on itself. Better to have a controlled demolition than just a structural collapse one morning at 3 a.m. Because eventually reality catches up with you. Just ask the Soviet Union in 1991. If we don't change things fundamentally, we will have a collapse just like they did. That is a reality. Neither Harris nor Trump are up to the challenge of that. However, a vote for Harris would have been a vote doing the same old thing to the end. A vote for Trump might lead to a very tumultuous 4 years, but just might be shocking enough to get a real candidate for change in. Not the fake change that you see and people advertise, but real change. Who that could be, I have no idea. But you know what? We're a nation of over 350 million people. I bet you there's one or two of them out there, and their last names aren't even Clinton or Bush or Biden or Trump or any of that family. That new generation needs to come in. We'll see. So no, I wasn't upset that Trump was president because I really don't feel like the Democrats deserve to win, and I don't feel like they're any more competent. I feel like they're so compromised by their corporate interests. On the other hand, I don't think Trump's going to be... I've heard some people say so many great things he's going to do. He'll probably do just like last time. But maybe not. I'll go into it with an open mind. At this point, both sides have lied to me. So, yeah, they're kind of on equal footing. I'll end with this. Something I really, really want. Something that we all need. A buddy comedy sitcom starring J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. Because that vice presidential debate was just great between the two of them. Those two have such great charisma together. I want a buddy comedy with those two together. I don't know what it'd be, but it'd just be... It'd be something. I would watch that all the time. That was probably the best thing to come out of all this. And it did give me hope that politics can't just go back to, being business as usual. That's no good. But we can go back to civil disagreement, but still with that underlying fundamental respect and just basic love for another human being. So that's what I'm hopeful for. So I honestly think that if J.D. Vance were to take over from Trump in this term coming up, there could be worse alternatives. Far worse. Because even though I disagree with J.D. Vance on some policies, I do think he's a decent person who does have the ability to love and care about people. And hopefully that extends to country. I also do wish Harris well in her hopeful retirement. All this talk about her running for 2028. Oh, no. Democrats, no. Stop it. First off, stop picking your candidates and not letting primaries do the same. Secondly, lay off the wanting to run a woman. That said, I wish her well enough. Just, go out of the public life. Enjoy time with your family and just go that. And also Tim Walz. Go back to supporting the rights of Veterans Affairs, and labor. I've heard some of his speeches that he did in front of Congress, and they were very impactful. I like that he seems to be on the very common man side. He definitely is a very common man. One thing I will say about him, he's not a millionaire, billionaire Democrat. In fact, his net worth is well in the low six figures. So that is at least something good. We'll see. I don't know. And it'll be very interesting to see how RFK does in the cabinet. I don't know. I find him kind of an interesting guy. Sorry. I know he's got some things about anti-vax that upset a lot of people, but oh, I'm weird like that. There's just something about him that I find attractive. I don't know. I don't know. And we'll see how Trump behaves. Again, if he at least kind of promotes space exploration and Ukrainian sovereignty, I'll be pretty happy, frankly, with those outcomes in and of themselves. So no, not upset. It is what it is. In a situation like this, where neither candidate is that good, you can either look at, well, no matter what happens, we lose, or no matter what happens, we win. I choose to look at the glass as being half full. I do not rescind my past criticisms of Donald Trump. He lied to us about 2020 in the election being stolen. It wasn't. And he was put on trial and found guilty by a jury of his peers. Judge Misha in that case seems to have been very fair and equitable. So that's what it is. We know what Donald Trump is. America knew what he did, knew who he was, and they voted him in. That's fine. That's democracy. The people were given the information. They made a choice. I am a fan of democracy. I would be hypocritical to say otherwise. And frankly, again, given the shenanigans with Biden and all that, I can't blame people. Because Democrats lied to us as well, especially about Biden's health. That's just as serious as anything that Trump lied to us about. C'est la vie. I just hope this division and all this can now kind of simmer down. And it does seem like it. One reason I waited to do this video so long is I wanted to see the reactions. And while the pundits and everyone on the Democrat side are all up in arms, and all the people at the top of the Democrat Party are up in arms, I think a lot of the common voting people are really taking a hard look at things. And I see a lot of reconciliation. By the way, all these people that are uninviting family because of Thanksgiving, because of politics of Thanksgiving and Christmas, fuck off. If you're breaking your family up over politics, you're a child. Stop that. Stop it. Just stop it. And, cutting off people like that just pushes them further into the other camp. No, let's come back together. Let's try to end this division. Let's get back to understanding each other. Because the more you know about people, the more you see them as individuals, the more you can empathize, and the less hate and vitriol is out there. It's been too much on both sides. Trump did a lot of things wrong. But the Democrats are far from innocent. It's time to move on. It's time to be Americans together. It really is. and I have the best hopes and wishes for people. Throughout this whole thing, I've been caught in the middle. Too many friends and family have been on both sides. People I love and respect. And you know, sometimes one side's right, sometimes the other side has a good point. But the election went the way it did. And, well, I plan on looking towards the future. Maybe one day the Democrat Party can get back to what it needs to be. Maybe, miracle of miracles, one day we'll see an effective third party, although the way both sides have entrenched themselves, that seems unlikely. We'll see. But I wanted to give you a nice long black box on it. My take. I wish it were more clear cut. I wish it were a simple thing, but it's not. And there's so much more could be said and done, even though this is a long video. Oh well. So hope everyone's doing well as we get into December. If you're afraid of a Trump presidency, I ask you not to worry. We don't know what will happen until it happens. And if you're excited for a Trump presidency, I'd ask you to just kind of moderate things and realize that he's promised a lot of things to a lot of people, and they can't all come true. So don't be too disappointed if he doesn't live up to all your expectations immediately. I saw a lot of that after Obama was elected. A lot of people got disillusioned with him very quickly. But keep in mind, this is the same old Donald Trump with the same old failings that he had before. A leopard doesn't change their spots at 78 years old. Oh well. So, let's just all kind of come together with that and move forward and care about each other. Because at the end of the day, the folks in D.C. are apart from us. There's no reason Americans need to fight. In fact, that's a tactic that has been used by politicians and the media to get us to do what they want for a very long time. Divide and conquer. Let's no longer stay divided. The more we're together, the harder we are to manipulate, and the more our voice can be heard. How about that? This is Misha. Catch you very soon. Next time.